Hey everybody, Nick here, and tonight we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance on this big guy right here. This is the Ontario Knife and Tool Robert Carter 2Quared. This is an interesting piece, and I'm looking forward to getting it apart just because, well, it should be interesting nonetheless. The action on this guy is already pretty damn good. The centering, though, is off. It is definitely favoring the show side a little bit. May not be fixable, might be fixable. We're going to give it a shot nonetheless. Sorry about the heat, but it's freaking cold here, and welcome to Michigan. But anyways, we're going to try and take this guy apart, see if we can do some favors for the action. Otherwise, here's what it is. Let's go ahead and pop this guy open. This is a big knife that is using T6 screws for some freaking reason or another. And they are free spinning T6 screws. Oh, Ontario. You know the way to my heart. Actually, no, you don't. Considering how long it took you to come up with a Rat 2 and D2 steel, they appear to be very, very unaware how to win my heart. But they have done so nonetheless. Alright, pop this loose. Alright. And then we'll do the same thing over here. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Beautiful. At the very least, it's coming apart very readily. And then we're going to pop this guy out, which looks maybe T8-ish. T8 sounds good, right? And I've lost the screw. That's okay. Here we go. Okay. Well, on the bright side, there's no Loctite or anything, so, whoa there. All right. Okay, yeah, so it looks like we're using some kind of Chicago screw or another, and they're actually mounted in the opposite directions, which, whatever. Okay, I can live with that. We can see here that it is indeed running on bearings, which is exactly what we would expect for an action of this kind of caliber. Yeah. Here we go. And I absolutely want to thank my buddy Scott for sending this little guy along. It's a knife that's been on my radar for a long time, but it's one of those that I probably just wouldn't pick up on my own. There's kind of a certain threshold that a knife needs to clear in terms of just like, how likely am I to actually want this? For me to want to do that myself. I mean, with Patreon patrons helping me out as they are, it becomes much, much easier to do something that I know is just like, not going to be me. But nonetheless, this is a knife that I'm really grateful to have on loan, because that way, you know, no matter how I feel about it, it just goes home at the end of it, and, well, case closed, problem freaking solved. So, yeah, anyways, interesting piece, though. Robert Carter is a designer who's getting a lot of love lately, as he should. It comes from a legacy of great knife makers, and is himself a great knife maker. The Carter Prime was a very nice piece, and a nice example of what Ontario is capable of when they set out to be a little bit higher end. Not that their lower end stuff, like the Rat series or anything, is bad. I don't want to impugn them there. I mean, they're a company I respect the heck out of. They do some very, very nice work in terms of your knife makings. But nonetheless, it is... Okay, now that's weird. Check this out. This little screw here has a D shape at the top of it there, which you would expect would lock into a D-shaped hole on the top here, but it doesn't. It's just circular. So these have the potential to not be free spinning, but they are nonetheless, which is, well, okay. So I was just saying how much I respect Ontario as knife makers, but then they did that, and that made it a little harder. I joke, but still, guys, come on. But anyways, yeah, Ontario does some pretty solid work. And in terms of like imported knife making sorts of situations, they're closer to the top of the pack, front of the pack. Packs have tops or fronts. Not sure. Probably both. It's wolves. I don't freaking know. But yeah. So anyways, this is an interesting piece from a company that I like a lot. I mean, the Rat 1 and 2 is still my favorite budget knives, although there's some great contenders out there. And even their higher end stuff, like the Carter Prime, has some really compelling stuff to it. It's a super thick blade, by the way. Holy crap, is this thing thick. It's ground very effectively. I mean, it gets down to a relatively thin edge, even relative to a lot of what you see, well, obviously in other modern knife making, but it is still a very, very thick blade. That works in their favor. It's very, well, I won't say it's very easy, but it is easier, it would seem, to get a good free swing in action when the blade weighs 18 freaking pounds. I mean, actually, let's just do that because it'll entertain me, and I could use some entertainment. This is the scale. You know this. The blade itself on this knife comes in at 2.84 ounces, which is impressive. But anyways, it's very. That blade can fall more readily down when you are when it's nice and big and heavy. And so, and that's, I think, in some ways why, for instance, the Grimsmo Norseman actually had a better action than the Rask. Not because, mechanically speaking, it was any less well done or anything. I think it was just more that it was it had a larger blade, longer, better leverage, etc. So I'm going to use the 10-weight nano oil here, and I'm using this convenient pen applicator just to make things a little bit easier here. That makes it, just so I don't over-lubricate quite as much as I tend to do. Go ahead and add some lubrication to the pivot here, no problem. Go ahead and add, well, I'll just drop the blade onto this guy. Here, come on. There we go. Kind of run it back and forth, just distribute that lubrication. If you're curious about the tools I'm using for this disassembly, I have a video on my disassembly toolkit. You should check that out, in which I talk about, well, my disassembly toolkit. And I have links to all these things, whatnot. But, yeah. Anyways, look, this is pretty straightforward at some level. In terms of your knife itself, I mean, the free spin in this ain't great, but that's life. Drop this on here, drop this in here. And let's just drop this onto here. Okay, so now what I'm going to go ahead and do is start reattaching the handles in the back here. Switch back to my T6 bit, and I'm going to use some blue thread locker here. There is some evidence that they have done so as well, and it's just never a bad idea. That's actually not true. There are rare occasions where you don't want to use thread locker. For instance, if your screws are free spinning and were in danger of stripping out anyways, during the initial disassembly, then you probably don't want to reassemble with it. Yeah, it's going to be more likely to come apart, but yeah, it's also going to be less likely to strip out and, well, die. So that's good. Avoiding death is always, generally speaking, a good thing. Generally speaking. All right. Unless you are a mortician, in which case avoiding death is going to be very, very bad for business. At least if my understanding of the mortician industry holds. I'm sure I've got a viewer out there who's a mortician. If so, let me know in the comments. But anyways, it's beside the point. The 2Quared here, it's a really weird name. Like, I bet that they are intending this thing here to spell squared. But no. Just no, it's the 2Quared. And frankly, that's a neat name, too. Lots of people could call a knife the squared, even though this is actually not really square on any dimension. Just doesn't do it for me. It's the 2Quared. It's like the Ablate. Like, guys, come on. Just acknowledge the truth here. Not that there is one universal truth of pronunciation and whatnot, but this one seems like a pretty easy sell. All right. Now, I've just put the pivot in first at a rough level. Then I'm going to go ahead and pop this lock bar over. There's something that's not fully seated, and it's probably the stop pin here. Here you go. It was the stop pin there. And so by moving the pivot by moving the blade into position, getting it off the stop pin, I was able to fully seat. Okay, centering's better. That's good. Action is very smooth. A couple of people, including Robert Carter, the designer, mentioned having some trouble with this knife actually hitting the inside of the backspacer, which is not great. So I'm curious if that's going to start happening, because that's usually a question of the stop pin not being quite rightly positioned. I got the impression from him that that was an early run sort of issue. No blade play. But it's always a possibility if there's like a latent tendency for that to happen, for it to happen after a disassembly. But, yeah. Nice. Nice. We're done. All right, there you go. Hope this has been interesting and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.